Definition of terms used in the brain kinematics theory. As any other subject, the subject of kinetics of the brain activities uses its own collection of related terms and definitions. These terms are not very different from what are used in other subjects, except more specifically adapted to this subject. The collection will be modified and extended by publishing more videos. Meaning of image from a shape to a meaningful context. A representation of external surface of something. A general impression of something. A simile or metaphor of something. Imagination. Formation of new ideas, images, concepts for external sides of something not all present to the senses. Thus, in general it covers visualization, perception, and conceptualization. Pixel. A minute area of a screen to receive a small image, and together with other receiving small images will compose a complete image. Horizontal communications between neurons within and between the cortex areas occurs through connectivity in fibers. In rest these communications are in random, but when the brain is active and generate a dream or thought, these communications are between neural assemblies that the assembly neurons fire synchronized and send a gross signal. In synchronized firings, local electromagnetic fields will be created that interact together and introduce further stress-straining forces in synapses level based on electrical and neurotransmitter currents. The synchronized firings, electromagnetic fields, and strain energy streams over the cortex layers flow in parallel. Although, strain energy streams are in different directions through the cortex layers, but the general direction is from the parietal to temporal to hippocampal, to prefrontal cortices, returning back to the parietal cortex. During a non-interrupted brain activity, this rotation will continue several times, till sensation, perception, and cognition processes will arrive in a relative mature level sequentially. Strain carrier wave are supported by activated synapses that vary continuously. Receptors are the cells that respond to light, heat, chemical or other external stimulus, or the postsynaptic components that receive and transmit firing signals to send them for processing. Brain tissues, including its connection, have viscoelastic property. Viscoelastic material, when are exposed to stress forces, they partly will strain immediately, and partly absorb strains internally as strain residual. Strain residual will itself partly deform connectivity if strong enough, and will be released by exciting outer cortex layers when it was accumulated too much, or the external suppress from sensory inputs are less. Therefore, connectivity deformation to encode new memory, and dreaming during light sleep or relaxed waking are the two product of the brain under stress forces. A pathway is the activity route through the cortex layers that run a brain activity and achieve an emotion, a conclusion, an expression, or a signal command for action. The bundle of streamlines that during running of dream or thought generation will interact activated long-term memory units and the current memory stream is called a pathway in kinematics of the brain activity subject. A pathway is somewhat directed by the activated memory stream bed in inner cortex layer, and partly current memory stream through outer cortex layer will strain the connected inner cortex layer, making memory structure to incorporate short-term or working memory. In non-vital creations, the central point to respond to spread forces on the unit is as simple as gravity center or other physical assumed points or lines to electromagnetic fields. In plants, a phloem network reflexes to light and nutrition sources. In basic animals, simple nerve nets will play a similar role for the unit's responses to environment. Their nerve cells talk to each other with the aid of an amino acid called glutamate, which, after being released by an excited nerve cell, helps set off a wave of calcium ions in adjacent cells. The wave travels down the next nerve cell, which relays a signal to the next one in line, enabling long-distance communication. In developed animals, the simple nerve net will be advanced to develop distributed and centralized nerve networks. The brain is the centralized processing and responding organ for advanced animals. In human, the brain circuits and especially the neocortex are developed, so that not only instinctual, but also emotional and conscious responses will be the outcomes. Mirroring is the process of reflecting connectivity configuration as an image in an outer layer, or imposing an image energy content on the inner layer within a neural assembly, as well as a produced image or concept in the prefrontal cortex back on the parietal cortex, or reverse. Mirroring over the cortex in vertical within neural assemblies and horizontal between cortices will be by strain energy attached to the electrochemical signals. Mirror neurons are the neurons that straightly convey sensory inputs to the motor outputs. In this process, consciousness has the least role, where in the mirror test, if the subject recognizes self's image in a mirror, not play with it as another subject, the recognition indicates a degree of self-consciousness. Consciousness and the subject of brain activity emerge whenever, against separate reference frames of object and subject, the two can coexist in the same frame and be able to replace each other as I and other identities. Coexisting and altering between I and other identities is only possible when other than material objects, in brain, encoded neural connectivity configurations, images of them would be mirrored as well. Images or object image have the capability to coexist and interact together in the same frame of the brain. As much as strain carrier wave around the cortex would be of higher kinetics, the coexisting and dialogue as interaction between them is more intensive, and the brain emerge higher degree of consciousness. A conscious system has an observer-observe united system that reports observation. This is not possible for non-vital creations, but for vital units with a brain system that more than electrochemical straight processes, image objects and subjects will be replaced by materialistic objects and subjects. Images can be present, interfere and interact with each other in the same system of the brain. Coexistence and dialogue between images make the brain a conscious system. The state of consciousness emerge in high-activity dynamics, highest in focused waking, weaker in relaxed waking, subconscious relaxed waking and sleep dreaming stages. It disappear in deep sleep stages that the brain is in its lowest dynamic state. If in a system, the integrating parts are added together to compose a whole picture, the system is of less or no complexity. However, if the composed parts do not show any similarity with the whole composed combination, the combination is complex. Depending how difficult it is to understand a combination from its integrands, that combination will be of different degree of complexity. Visualization is a cognitive work using imagination as raw material. In other words, imagination takes place in the sensory brain, but visualization is using big images formed in the sensory brain, rehearsing them to visualize it by induction and deduction over the prefrontal cortex. Sensation and perception are the two processes that take place over the parietal and temporal brains by interaction of short-term memory, integrated of sensory and internal inputs, with the long-term memory between the cortex layers. Conceptualization is a cognitive process takes place over the motor brain. Sensory brain consists of the parietal and temporal lobes. What is referred as the emotion brain is the limbic system, consisting of the hippocampal formation and the amygdala, and its accessories, in center of the brain. Motor brain consists of the prefrontal cortex, premotor and motor areas. Parietal cortex is a part of the sensory brain, storing memory of objects, colors, numbers, concepts. Most of sensations takes place in the parietal cortex. Temporal cortex is a part of the sensory brain, storing shapes, addresses, dimensions, maps, layouts and distances. Prefrontal cortex receives the streams of components arriving from the sensory brain, inducing and deducing them to emerge advance emotions and reducing concepts. The products of the prefrontal cortex as conclusions, decisions, and plans either will back motor actions, or return to the sensory brain to further mature products by more inputs, or consolidate new memory of the produced concepts. Hippocampus and amygdala are the most important parts of the limbic system. The hippocampus is involved in short-term memory production and incorporation with the cortex layer. The amygdala is the center for basic feelings like fear, aggression, as well as feelings associated with the physiological needs like eating and sex. The amygdala in connection with the prefrontal cortex forms and arouses advanced emotions, like love and satisfaction. Current memories are the memory streams through outer cortex layers, where long-term memories lay over the inner cortex layers and the brain white matter. The current memory over the sensory brain is called short-term, where over the motor brain is called working memory. Current memory will form by attraction of similar long-term memory units over the inner cortex layers. Indeed, long-term memory structure format the cortex outer layer how to conduct current memory and are formatted how to add new long-term memory units in its structure. In turn, current memory in larger periods will convert to new long-term memory units. Similarity of memory units in vertical axis across the cortex layers are referred as symbols, simile, and metaphor. Long-term memory are in units, and because of semifractal structure, they are called memory motifs. The brain long-term memory is in a fractal structure is a structure that repeats its motifs in gross complex units of emotions, ideas, personality, and likes. Long-term memories are consolidated according similarity in form and meaning as they are laterally laid out. To recall a piece or whole memory, the related spread units should be linked as the same sequence as they happened. Theme memory in the hippocampus will put the memory units in the same trail. Meanwhile, emotion memory in the amygdala or over the prefrontal cortex boost the sequencing, meaning memories attached to stronger emotions will be recalled easier. The initiator for a recalling memory is the activated concept memories in conjunction with the theme memory. Spacetime data are the coordination that define any object, where information are the content of messages exchanged between I and other within the brain, or between different communicating objects. Spacetime is made of images, where information measure concepts. Continuum has spacetime coordination in quantum scales, meaning it lacks materialistic essence. It is emerged when activity is backed in a very high dynamics environment, meaning very fine amplitudes and very high frequency of alterations between matter wave states. Straight input-output reflexes, and processed inputs with what's stored as memory in the brain are the two different categories of brain activities. A normal activity is a combine of little, moderate or strong input processing. The extent of processing determines how much an activity would non-voluntary, semi-voluntary, or high voluntary. Intermediate layers of input processing, either sensory or internal inputs, appear in sensing, perceiving, feeling, thoughts, expressions and speaking and outcome responses. Some activities extend to any of the above-mentioned layers. Thought generation, as an example, can remain as self-thought or advances to expressions, dialogue, and speech. Any brain activity that the cortex is involved will be emerged by interaction between long-term, including genetic expressions, and current, including short-term and working memories. In the above-mentioned interaction, either activated long-term memory units will be recalled to incorporate within the current memory, or current memory induce excess strains to be absorbed in inner cortex layers. Thus, recalling and memory consolidation are the two opposite processes which are involved in the brain activities, although the time frame for the two processes are in different ranges, immediately in recalls, but time-consuming for memory consolidation. This collection of terms will be completed intervallic if any new term would be added or audience will ask for.